Hi, welcome to this week's With Liberty and Justice for Some. I'm Congressman Mark Pocan. I'm with here today with David Sirota, who is the editor-in-chief of The Lever. You may know him as the person who conceived the story and screenplay for Netflix's Don't Look Up, which I think you received a nomination for an Academy Award. Wow.
Yes, that's right.
That's awesome, David. Thanks so much for being with us. For our one question today, I am with the Assembly Democratic leader from the city of Racine, Greta Neubauer. Greta, welcome and thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Greta, so I'm going to ask a question a little different than we normally do. Usually we say, what one federal law, if you could change, would you change? Since you're obviously in state government, what one state law, if you just had the instant ability to change, what would it be and why would you change that law?
Well, it's a hard question to pick one, but I have been really focused on education. The schools in Racine have been struggling for many years, and we have really felt the impact of workers losing their rights, of educators and public employees not having the ability to collectively bargain. That has hurt our teachers and staff, but of course that's also hurt our kids because we know that good workplaces for employees are good places to learn. And so I am excited and hopeful about the opportunity to restore those collective bargaining rights to public employees in the future. And then of course there are a few other labor laws that we'd like to change as well around prevailing wage and right to work. We know that labor is always been a critical part of the Wisconsin story, and unions make our state strong and give working people the ability to thrive. And so I look forward to a Wisconsin in which we respect our working people and we restore their ability to negotiate and advocate on their own behalf.
Yeah, and pre-Scott Walker, we did respect that, right, across the board, and he took away those rights from public employees. Then he went after and made us a right to work state. Then he even went after prevailing wage. And, now he's gone, right? He's not in the state, fortunately. I think for what you said, support for working people to have a voice in their workplace is at a high of probably about 50 years at least. People want to see it, and that's the right direction. So thanks so much, Greta. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So David, we've never done this before. We are doing a dual podcast. You have your podcast. What's the name of your podcast again, David?
It's called Lever Time.
Lever Time. And ours is With Liberty and Justice for Some. And this is our first kind of joint posting. So we're excited about that. And thanks so much for being able to have a conversation today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So let's just talk about, you've had so much experience working with not just Bernie Sanders, but going back in the day on appropriations. Dave Obey from Wisconsin, who I have to admit is a bit of a role model for me. I really have so much respect for Dave Obey. But you've worked on campaign side. You've been an author of 3 books, at least one of which I own, if not more.
So you were the one. No, I'm
yeah. No, it's funny. I remember I've had that because it was a book that's now, oh my God, 15 to 20 years old, but bought it at the time when it was brand new and out. And but also, people, at least on my podcast, may not know that you won a nomination for Best Original Screenplay for conceiving the story for Don't Look Up, Netflix.
That's right. Yes. A movie that feels like it's becoming more real every day. It really feels like honestly, the movie, I'm really proud of the movie. Obviously, I think it really had a lot of messages in there that are important, but it feels like it becomes quainter and quainter every day because reality is overtaking what we were making fun of at the time, right? Like it's like what we were making fun of at the time is no longer like, set 15 minutes in the future. Now it's like we're inside of that world.
Right. I think science is like under so much attack. I like to say that the movie Idiocracy. Have you ever seen that?
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, I said we should move that now from comedy to documentary.
Yes.
In fact, that's since you're a screenwriter, I mean, start the GoFundMe, and I think I could see an Idiocracy too. Uh,
Totally. I often say on social media, "Don't Look Up" was a
yeah,
documentary, and
totally.
that's what it really feels like when it. And by the way, not just when it comes to the climate crisis, when it comes to basically everything. That
Yeah,
there is a reality that we can verify, and the denial of reality is just the way our politics seems to operate. And I feel like I'm waiting for everybody to look up. I mean, you and I are
yeah.
talking right now in a week that saw the so-called big beautiful bill pass, which included, for instance, among other things, massive cuts to clean energy programs, and then
Mhm.
literally days later, this horrifying and horrible flood in
Yep.
Flash Flood Alley in Texas. It's like reality is yelling at us to
Yes.
take the climate crisis seriously, and the party that controls Congress is just not only not interested in taking it seriously, is actively hostile to doing the most basic things that can and were being done to
Yeah.
try to address this crisis.
In fact, they said that utility rates will go up because of the
Yep.
bill. 840,000 jobs over the next 5 years, because we had a lot of job creation coming out of the Inflation Reduction Act, much less the real life, ramifications. And I think, was it New Mexico just had a flood
Another flood.
situation?
Yep.
Yeah, in the last 24 hours. I don't know if you saw the Secretary of Agriculture has a solution to the problem of people who are on Medicaid. And now that some will have to work. She's suggesting they could replace the immigrant workers on farms, and it's not a joke. She's like seriously proposing these ideas, and every day is a Veep episode. Every day is another Don't Look Up, another day of this craziness.
I mean, my question for you, and the thing
Yeah.
I've been kind of trying to figure out here is, when you zoom out of the Republican bill that just passed, the Republican bill doesn't make sense in even in a political way, at least the way I understand politics. That the Republican Party's base has changed a bit. It's become
Mhm.
a bit more working class, and the bill disproportionately harms the working class.
Yeah.
Also, some of its benefits disproportionately benefit sort of upper income cohorts of voters who have been voting more Democratic. So, in other
Mhm.
words, a Republican bill disproportionately harms a part of the electorate that has in recent years become more Republican, and helps a part of the electorate, the higher income folks, who have become more Democratic. And I guess that's all to say, I don't understand this. Like, even
Yeah.
setting aside how bad the bill is, like what it does, what the effects of it are gonna be, I don't understand the politics of this bill. And maybe you can help me understand that, because just looking at it that way, why would the Republicans want to pass a bill that hurts their own voters and actually helps some upper income, more affluent Democratic voters? Like, what is that about?
Yeah, they don't understand the politics of it. There's a reason why they're told not to have town halls right now, because they would have to answer questions. And if you answer questions about the bill, everything you said is true, as well as a whole lot more. I mean, this is Donald Trump's number one priority is Donald Trump and his family, right? And if he's going to benefit from the tax breaks, that alone makes it his holy grail. It's enough for him. But it truly is a cult, the Republican Party these days, and for a lot of their followers, what they like about Donald Trump most is the racism, bluntly. I mean, and this doesn't impact that. Where normally in politics, we know it's pocketbook economics. The thing that I think I love so much about Bernie Sanders is we've always focused on that, right? That is the issue, the economics that we should be winning on, people agree with us on, but Republicans are so good at the little wedge issues. And as long as Donald Trump is still going to talk tough about immigration and have a bunch of ICE agents raid parks in LA and things like that, that gives them what they're looking for, despite the fact that their pockets are being picked. And literally that money is going to, I think 1.2 trillion, I could be off a little on that number, of the money is going to people who make over $500,000 a year. That's about equivalent to the cuts to both Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act. That's going to affect 17 million people, their health insurance. So it defies political common sense like you and I would understand, but this is kind of an era where, I think Donald Trump has maybe upended how we talk about politics, period.
Well, that's what I actually worry, that we're in an era of what's called post-materialist politics.
Mhm.
I mean, my understanding of politics has been essentially it's the economy, stupid, and not
Yeah.
just the
Yeah.
economy, but like the economy, meaning like the affordability. Do you have a
Mhm.
job? Can you have a decent standard of living? And what I worry about is looking at this bill. I'm like, wait a minute. Have we entered an age where the economic effects of a tax bill, a tax really, and a budget bill, don't actually matter, like, to our politics? Is that what the Republicans are really banking on, that they can actually harm their own voters and then go to run for reelection, and their own voters won't notice this or won't care, or at least won't be voting on those sets of issues? Like, I do wonder if the Republicans are like, look, everyone thinks politics is just a culture war. Nobody pays attention to the basic financial issues of surviving in this country, and that's how we'll win. But that is ahistorical to, up until this point, to how we've understood elections. I just
Yeah.
am worried that like something has broken, and now it's just the culture war is the only topic of political conversation, and the way people vote.
Well, I think the miscalculation they've made is, for a significant chunk of their base, everything we just said is true, right? They don't care because they care about something else. But what they didn't calculate are a couple things. I got record numbers of phone calls in my office this year. I've been here 12 and a half years in Congress. At first, we got up to 300 calls a day at the local office. Then they got to 500 calls a day. So a lot of people are plugging in to what this bill is going to do. We know that of the half of the people who know about the bill, it's lopsided 20 to almost 30 points in some polls, right? People do understand that aspect of it. But I think the biggest indicator is that April Supreme Court election we had in Wisconsin. I mean,
Mhm.
first of all, April nonpartisan elections are lower turnout. They're not all that exciting. We didn't have any big races in cities like Madison or Milwaukee. Yet our turnout, and it wasn't that we elected a good judge, a progressive judge, to become a Supreme Court justice. And it wasn't that she won by 10 points in a state where you win by one, usually statewide. It was that turnout that so many people came out. We were at mid-level midterm congressional election turnout for an April nonpartisan Supreme Court race. I mean, I'm sure there are people in a grocery store line next to Susan Crawford, who was our candidate, who don't know who she is, literally, but they knew to come out and vote because of all of this broader stuff. So I do hope that the miscalculation is that they think this works. And again, it does work for Donald Trump. It does work for the donor class, right? It does work for plenty of special interests, but where it doesn't work ultimately, and their miscalculation, is that they think that broader people won't pay attention, that they're just focused on that base.
Yeah, and I think the challenge is going to be making sure that Americans really understand the direct connection between this legislation and what they experience. Now, I know that there are timing issues here. I mean, it's
Mhm.
whether it was because of the parliamentarian and the budget process itself or not. The upshot is that some of the seemingly, and I want to underscore seemingly, good things in this bill come quickly, and the really, really harsh pain of this bill
Yeah.
is scheduled to come after the election. So stuff like the no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, you can write off parts of your auto loan interest. And I want to be clear, a lot of those are not as simple as they sound, But you
Right.
can
Right.
imagine the Republican ads are going to make them sound like the greatest thing in the world. And just as always, the devil's in the details. In fact,
Yep.
a lot of this stuff is going to be very difficult to actually for working class people to use, et cetera, et cetera. But the Republicans have baked in that they'll be able to wave that around before they're like, hey, don't look over at the $1 trillion in tax cuts we're giving to rich people. Look over here at these few little nice things that we're promising you that are coming online, and don't even think about those healthcare cuts that are, we don't want you to know about them. They're coming after the
After,
election,
yeah,
right? After the
after.
election, right? But I think even beyond that, that what I think is concerning is whether both the Democratic Party's messaging machine and the media itself will make as many Americans aware of the direct connection between this bill and what they are going to unfortunately experience. As an example, one thing that I think is concerning is the fact that Medicaid programs in states across this country are not called Medicaid. They're not.
Yeah.
Every state has a different name for them.
Badger care in
Badger
Wisconsin.
care, exactly. So one concern I have is, and by the way, this is not a concern for the Democratic Party this is a concern for like our democracy, that we like understand that this happened and then here's what's going to happen. That I worry that somebody in Wisconsin will say, oh, I'm not going to be affected by those Medicaid cuts because I'm on Badger care.
Yeah.
Right? Like, are you talking to your colleagues and to governors, people all up and down throughout state, local government, about communicating, hey, when you're not on Badger care or when you have to be loaded up with all this paperwork to reapply and to et cetera, that's because of this bill. Like, is there going to be a coordinated effort to make clear to people that the relationship there?
So I think you're seeing it happen through at least Democratic House members. I can't speak for the Senate. I'm assuming they have something similar. I wouldn't bank anything on the DNC these days. Just my personal opinion is, the internal fights that they love to have with the same people who've been there for a while. I won't get into it, but I do think that, one of the things the Progressive Caucus is embracing, and we tried to make it broader, but we're going to start with it and show the success, is taking it to Republican districts. So I've been doing this. I go and do town halls in Republican districts, and it's powerful because right now Republicans are told not to do them. Well, that doesn't pass the smell test, right? If it's really such a great bill, why wouldn't you talk about it? So getting in their district, in their face, really means something. We got up to 20 or 30 members doing it. Thanks to Greg Casar, our new Progressive Caucus chair. He just got 50 of us to commit to go into a Republican district in the next couple months and start doing this. And that, I'll tell you, when I've done it, I've done 3 town halls directly in Derek Van Orden's district in Wisconsin, 3, one literally 7 minutes outside of it. I had 1,000 people. He had 10,000 people within, the area. The turnout is amazing. The local press gives it pre-coverage, post-coverage. They just want to hear from a member of Congress on the bill. And if someone's not willing to talk about it, that is alone the message, right? It's not a he said, she said, or this number or that number. It's who really is confident enough that this bill is going to help you or hurt you. And we're having those conversations. So I do think that will be helpful. But, I'm not counting on bluntly the DNC to come in or someone else like that.
No, and I feel like Donald Trump, if the shoe was on the other foot, Donald Trump would be sending, and his Republican Party would be sending letters out saying, making explicitly clear what's going on here. And look, we live in an information ecosystem in which I feel like people's memories are like 15 minutes long. Like nobody can remember anything beyond, because there's just so much information coming at us all the time. And I just think it's going to be incredibly important to constantly make clear the connections between what the Trump administration and the Republicans have done and what people are experiencing. And it goes back to what Donald Trump himself campaigned on, right? The affordability crisis, right?
Yeah.
This bill, I heard somebody put it this way, that the first thing people are going to feel every day is the rise in electricity prices,
Yeah.
right? Like that is going to come out of this bill in a really serious way and hit everybody in their wallet. And I just think like the Democrats have such an opportunity here to make that entirely clear. I mean, I do think the other question is if do you think there's any possibility that if there's enough pressure, enough outrage, that the Republicans will feel enough pressure to walk back some of the worst parts of this, any of it? Right? I mean, like I do. I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
naive. Like I'm
Yeah.
not a
Yeah.
naive. I'm not being naive here. But like I sort of, maybe it's my like hopeful brain wants to imagine like there's so
Right.
much pressure that they're like, all right, we'll put off the Medicaid cuts another year or two or
Yeah.
something. Like, do you think that's possible?
Um, Honestly, I think they're more afraid of Donald Trump than anything else, right? If we're giving up our Article 1 constitutional responsibilities around tariffs, around money we've already appropriated that they're just taking away, that's Congress's purview. The fact that we won't stand up in any substantial way to Donald Trump tells me he still is in the driver's seat in their party, right? So I think that's going to be the difficult part. The question is, you saw Don Bacon leave. You saw Tillis, announce he's not running. Who else like that? Like David Valadao in
Right.
California, soft-spoken, decent person, but over 60% of his constituents receive Medicaid, and he voted for this bill not once but twice now.
Mhm.
How do you do that and get reelected? And yes, those cuts won't happen until after the next election, but what will take place, and there will be stories about people losing health care, is on the Affordable Care Act. Those cuts take place sooner.
Mhm.
So, I was told that in my district, if you're a couple, they're a 60-year-old couple making $85,000 a year, and because they took away the assistance for the Affordable Care Act, their premium will go up $16,000 a year. And at that point, a lot of people aren't going to be able to have health insurance. And then when those hospitals start having to pick up the tab
Right.
and the money that's appropriate isn't enough, I think there are going to be next year some really awful stories generated that will make people realize, even though they hid some of this to after the election, what's coming on deck. And
Yes. Yes.
I think that's part of what is going to happen.
The point about Trump intimidating members of his own party,
Mhm.
let's look into the future here for a sec, because stipulating that like the agenda that Trump is pushing is not what we agree with. I have said to some folks of late, setting aside what he's doing, setting aside what he's pushing, that he is creating a model or reminding Americans that the president has a bully pulpit
Mhm.
to use to pressure members of his own party. And I look back on the last like 15, 20 years, and I look at Democratic presidents and I say, I really haven't seen them use that bully pulpit to sort of pressure members of their own party
Yeah.
to get on board. I mean, I actually think Joe Biden, weirdly enough, actually in many ways had more legislative success, and we don't really have to debate that, than Obama did in pushing like really actually
Yep. Build back
progressive
better. Yep.
legislation, Build Back Better, the American Rescue Plan. I mean,
Yep.
these were really huge victories,
Big
right?
vision.
Big
Yeah.
vision and smaller margins in Congress got it done. But I
Mhm.
have sensed like a hesitancy among Democratic presidents to like use their bully pulpit to keep their own party in line. It's always like those wavering 10 or 20,
Yeah.
right, that are like ruining everything. And the Democratic presidents typically are like, fine, whether it's cinema or mansion or whatever, fine, we'll just like sort of, we have to, and people call it the rotating villain. I wonder if like in watching Donald Trump do what he's doing, that there's a possibility that the next Democratic president, assuming there are future elections, that the next Democratic president is like, you know what?
Mm.
Like, if I got 4 or 5 or 10 Democratic congressional problems, I'm going to go like make their lives uncomfortable in their districts by activating the people in their districts to actually get done what I and we as our party have promised to do. Like
Yeah.
is there something to glean from Trump, stipulating that we're not saying he's a good person or we agree with anything he's doing, but is there something to glean about how the power of the presidency can be used?
Yeah, and let me take this one step further, because this is a position I don't know if another member of Congress would offer right now, but I think that we have moved a little too close to the don't look up idiocracy world, that celebrity means a lot. And I don't think the average member of Congress or senator or governor
Absolutely.
has a lot of pizzazz, period, right? I remember hearing people last November, a young African American male in Wisconsin, has said to me, Donald Trump's just entertaining. I love watching him, right? And people didn't look at what the vote was going to be affecting their lives as directly as that. I would even go to the point, as much as they should use the bully pulpit much more seriously than I have seen done. But I'm open to a celebrity running as a Democrat for president. I don't think you have to be an elected official anymore, given where we're at. I think where society's at, the power that Donald Trump had in getting elected against everyone's best interest, even though he had been president and we knew what he was about. How about you? I mean, are you willing
I'm
to
torn
go
on it,
there
right?
yet?
Like I'm torn on it. Like I
Yeah.
obviously the power of celebrity is the power to communicate in a
Yeah.
fragmented information environment, right? Like
Mhm.
celebrity can still break through. And Donald Trump is able to communicate
Yes.
and break through because he has he's had really for what 30, 40 years sort of access to celebrity. That's what
Yeah.
he is. I think the problem is that like once we succumb to that as like as what we think and what we accept as appropriate for these jobs, we are we're giving up something, right? I mean, I'm not somebody who says, look, the only person who kind of people who can be president are people who are politicians. I'm not
Yeah.
like that, right? But I think like it's a job where you're running a large institution, right? I mean,
Mhm.
that is what it is, right? It's like a job, you're running a large institution.
Yeah.
I think, for instance, somebody who's had experience as a CEO of a giant corporation. I'm not saying they'd probably be my candidate, but like,
Mhm.
okay, like that's relevant experience. You've run a giant entity. You know, you've run whatever. You know, you've run a state. That all makes sense to me. I think once we succumb to like you're just famous, so you should be able. You're
Yeah.
qualified to run the giant bureaucracy. Like I feel like we're succumbing to something, and I'm not being unrealistic here because I do also understand, and I think what we're circling around here is that that job in particular, it's not just running the institution, it's also
Yeah.
communicating.
Yeah.
The
It's that power of the
communication
bully
part
pulpit.
is
Yeah.
just so important.
Yeah.
And I do fear, so I'm like all over the place here. I do
No,
fear
hey,
that we're in a place where the only people with the skills or the platform to communicate are those whose qualification is essentially being a celebrity. But I would say this, maybe we're not there yet. Like maybe we're not there yet. I think it's going to be tested, assuming, which is not a safe assumption, that Donald Trump is not running again, but because of the
right.
Constitution, et cetera, et cetera. Assuming there's another election where there
Yeah.
is a JD Vance character versus a Democratic nominee. JD Vance is a lot of things. I don't think he's like a celebrity like Donald Trump.
No, I agree.
Right.
They
So
don't have another one on the horizon either. I
I
agree.
don't think they do. I do think that JD Vance is a good politician. I do think he is an effective politician. I actually think in some ways that JD Vance is um, as sort of scary in a lot of ways as Trump, in the sense that JD Vance is arguably more palatable to
Mhm.
different kinds of voters. I mean, there's like Trump sort of like there's like a you love him or you hate him kind of thing going on with Trump. Like there's no middle ground.
Right.
Like I kind of feel like, and watching JD Vance in various media environments, I'm kind of like, look, this guy can code switch. This guy can like
Mhm.
not sound like an insane sort of extremist right winger when he flips a switch, right? Like this guy is like a skilled politician, and I think like don't wish for it to be JD Vance's Republican Party or
Yeah.
Josh Hawley's Republican Party,
Right.
because those guys are effective politicians.
Yeah. Well, Josh Hawley's a charlatan, not that JD Vance is not. I just think JD Vance needs a serious infusion of charisma for the next step, right?
Agreed. Agreed.
Um, But the fact that the most popular politician right now by several polls I've seen is Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
Right? Someone who's authentic, genuine, has not changed, is fighting for what, again, I think we've always known progressive values are the majority values for people out there.
Yes.
Um, I just am maybe not seeing the natural next person coming out of, Congress, Senate, governor for that. And I'm open to, I think, whatever it takes to make sure, because we're going to have so much cleaning up to do. Um,
So much.
it's just fortunately, I think next year we're in a good position to take back the House. Although there are a couple redistrictings they may do in Texas and somewhere else that could put us,
Which would be a significant check
yeah,
on his power.
significant check. And we would have the ability to do oversight.
Hmm.
And that helps, again, using the bully pulpit. Our biggest problem right now, and I don't have a direct answer for it, but we don't have, when you don't have a president, you don't have a figurehead for the party. And as I said, the DNC is kind of like junior league, right? We don't have a point person, which makes it more difficult. And that's happened previously when the party, goes away out of power. But it makes it complicated when I'm doing town halls and people are like, why can't the Democrats just say? And I agree, but we don't have a central one person to go to, which means, we're going to have to figure that out moving forward to get, as you said, this message across adequately.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Like the sort of directionlessness, people's perceived directionlessness of the party leadership is only contributing to this. It's
Yes.
hard to envision what a strong party leadership looks like right now with the party being out of power. I mean, the polls are brutal when it comes to the Democratic leadership right now,
Mhm.
where Donald Trump is not popular, but who people perceive to be the Democratic leaders in Congress are also not popular. What do you make of that? What do you think that what do you think's going on there?
Well, also the Democratic Party is not popular. I
Right,
mean, not
exactly.
even the leaders, right? So that's, I mean, part of it is why, again, I think Bernie and AOC going around the country has been helpful is it's being authentic, it's being right on issues where people are at. People are hurting. I think one of the reasons I hope I do a good job in Congress is I am kind of an everyman. I'm about as average as you can get. I live, paycheck to paycheck like people do. I'm not one of the wealthy. I'm not one of the lawyers in Congress. And we don't have enough of that, right? So you're not seeing it. I think on Hakeem realizes this, and I think part of why he did that fight, the speech,
Yeah.
was to show the fight, right? And he has throughout this session talked about affordability and what we just saw happen with Mamdani in New York and how well he did on that message. Hakeem has been there trying to get us consistently, but often there's a lot of shiny lures out there that Donald Trump puts out there, and we're all different ones taking different. Our polling on where we stand on immigration right now is not good. We don't have good messaging on that. But he's tried to get us to focus on that because, as he says, it was the number one issue for Donald Trump getting elected. Half the people voted the economy leaving the polls, but it's also his biggest detriment because he's done nothing around affordability right now. But with Chuck Schumer, it's hard. I mean, coming out of that bill, and he changed the name of it. It was the big high five. It's not even a low five, right? It's not what we needed, what people are looking for, and I think people want us to fight. I mean, I'm as pissed as other people are, but the people who call my office, and I'm as scared as they are sometimes, and I'm as concerned as they are. And that's what they want at this moment. They want you to meet that. And if you're not, we're not doing what they want from us. And I think, Hakeem's style is very extremely calm and centered, right? And I think maybe that's a part of the disconnect that people are seeing, but they don't realize. I mean, I know Hakeem well. I actually think he's highly competent and ready for this challenge. But it's a broader problem than just the leadership. It's the party itself. They see us as weak.
Yeah, and I think if we're, to be frank, I think there's a lot of the party, the rank and file voters who remember what happened in, I mean, in three successive presidential elections, right? 2016, I think a lot of the base of the party got excited by Bernie Sanders
Mhm.
and felt disappointed when uh, he lost the primary. I mean, some people think he
Yeah.
lost unfairly. He lost the primary. 2020, he ran. He got people excited. There were people that were excited again. He lost the primary. There again, whether you think it was thumb on the scale or not by the sort of party leadership, he lost the primary. Sort of, you know. Then 2024, the absolute debacle of Biden running again, and the next sort
Yeah.
of like a sort of coronation of Kamala Harris. I think there is a demoralization and a sort of disillusionment and like I guess what I'm saying is there's a collective
Yeah. No, I
accumulated
agree.
effect of that where people are like, I can't even get excited anymore. Like you've like taken the
Yeah.
like I can't even believe like I'm not saying this is the truth. It's like we were fooled into believing something was going to change. And it's
Yeah.
been like 3 straight elections where you guys have like not really behaved, or the primary process, for instance, has not produced a serious or what we think is a vigorous enough response to what is going on. And I would ask you, I mean, look, I'm looking at the news of late, like where you've got sort of frankly, the same old people, now they're going to do Project 2029. It's like
Yeah.
some of the Biden folks, some of the old Clinton folks. And I think there's like a sense like, are the people who ran the party into the ground still going to be the ones who are like calling the shots here? Like, where is the sort of new, I mean, it's like a cliche, but like the new blood. And I'm not just talking about like age here. I'm talking
Mhm.
about like sort of new movements inside of the party that says, look, we went through that. We're not going back to sort of Obamaism, Clintonism, and I think Biden actually had some new policies that broke from that
Mhm.
past, but he was not a good salesman of them. Like he wasn't really positioned to let anybody know that he was doing it, which is really bad. But I just wonder, like, is there conversations? Are there conversations happening where it's like, look, we have to like reinvigorate this party and make room for like essentially new people? And I'm not
Yeah.
like picking on, you've been in Congress 12 years. I'm not
No.
like blaming you. I'm just saying
Yeah.
like this is a real topic.
No. I mean, James Carville, the guy from Chicago, I can't remember his name because I didn't serve with him, who wants to run for president.
Rahm Emanuel.
Oh my God, Rahm
Yeah,
Emanuel.
right.
How many Cuomos can we retread, right?
Right.
I'm
Like,
I'm with you. I'm with you. Which is why maybe that's why my answer is I'm willing to break out of the political class to go to a different class to look for a candidate because I think that's my frustration as well. I mean, I know we are the only industrialized nation that doesn't have universal health care. That is such a winner of an issue with real people. And yet we don't have people putting that as a front and center issue. The fact that taxation under Eisenhower is significantly different than taxation now. And yet we're letting in this bill, just that tip tax alone, so the no tax on tips, overtime, interest on auto loans, and the senior break, those 4 that I would say help working people add up to about 5% of the bill, right? They're almost nothing. The tipped one alone, 5% of low and medium wage earners are tipped employees, and 30% of them already don't pay taxes because they don't make enough
that's right.
to pay, right? So it's so small, but there are these big issues around healthcare and around the Green New Deal. I mean, honestly, we want to continue to rely on fossil fuels in Texas and Alaska rather than, be innovators. Yet we don't see enough of the folks that are at the level to be considered running for president talking about them. And even when, and I shouldn't even be saying this, but I loved when Cory Booker broke. It was at a time people were really thinking the Senate was old and stale, too old and stale. And he did that speech on the floor and it reinvigorated some people at town halls. But then I think he voted for
A nominee
what's
right
his
after
name's
that.
father-in-law.
That's
Yeah, right. And
Kushner.
stuff. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
here's
Kushner.
here's my big thing I want you to bring to other Democratic members of
Yes.
whoever you're talking to. This is an issue that I've been thinking a lot about, which is that Democrats are known and have been known as the party of government. But in many ways, the quandary is they have not necessarily, in a lot of ways, taken governance seriously in a specific way. That when people think of government, they think typically, oftentimes, of a miserable process. I
Mhm.
got to file my taxes. I got to, I
Yes.
got to call up the IRS. I'm on hold for 1,000 years, right? Ask yourself this question. Why is Amazon, when you poll people and ask about trust in or confidence in institutions, even among Democratic voters who know that Amazon does not treat its workers well, et cetera, et cetera,
Mhm.
Amazon is considered one of the most trusted institutions in America by voters, including Democrats.
Yeah.
And ask yourself why that is. And I think the answer, and I'm thinking out loud here, but I think the answer is because whatever you have to say about Amazon's business practice, and I am not shilling for Amazon, right?
Mhm.
But it's a simple, easy experience at the user level. You can return
Yeah.
things quickly. You can order things. They get there 20, right? It is, however complicated Amazon is behind the scenes, it is a simple, easy to use experience. And I think about some of the things that have happened, like think about Obamacare, right?
Mhm.
Obamacare had important reforms. The
Mhm.
system before Obamacare was not a good system.
Yeah.
But the problem is that Obamacare essentially preserved
A
and
system that
built
had
off of a
yeah.
very flawed
Yeah.
system of misery and complexity, right? I think there's a stat, I think it's like, what, Americans are spending something like 12 million hours a week on the phone with insurance companies. And I
Ugh.
think I bring that up because it's like, if you're going to be the party of government, then you've got to deliver things with that power that people understand, appreciate, and feel are easy to use and and they see the direct relationship in how it is benefiting them. What are the two most popular programs in American history? Medicare, Social Security. I
Mhm.
would argue part of the reason why they're so popular is because they're simple. They're
Yeah.
easy to
Yeah.
use, right?
Yeah.
They not only help you, the help sort of comes to you in a pretty easy way. And I think like when Democrats do get back into power, I want to see them think about things through the end user experience. This is why, I mean, I understand the Progressive Caucus gets this morally universal programs, not means
Mhm.
tested. Universal, easy to use programs are morally correct, but they're also like politically correct
Yeah.
because
Easier
they
to make
don't
work. Yeah.
they don't bury you in paperwork and steal your time and make it miserable for you to get the benefits that you're supposed to receive. So I
Yeah.
just think that big issue when you guys get back into power, like when you structure legislation, because here's the thing, there's a whole set of lobbies that want to make things complex because they profit off of complexity, right?
Mhm.
I go back, I think
Yes.
about the tax system, right? The
Oh.
direct file system that the Democrats pushed, and it was good that they pushed it, right? Where you can file your taxes for free. Who's the opponent to that? The very powerful
Right.
tax prep companies who
Yes. Yeah.
want the tax system to be miserable and complex
Yeah.
so that you have to hire them. I think this is like the way in the next 10, 20, 30 years, if the Democrats get serious about, we're not just pushing these initiatives on moral grounds, but when
Mhm.
we enact them, we're going to make them so easy, so universal that you will love them. That extra step is sort of the key step to building
Mhm.
political constituencies around those things. And I think that's what's been lost now. And obviously, when government doesn't work, that helps the Republicans. Because if you're the party of government and everyone hates government, everyone thinks government is miserable, that's not good politics for your party. It's good politics for the
Yeah.
other party.
I've heard people say it's okay to say, you know what? We screwed up in the past. We
Yes,
didn't do this right. Right.
right?
And if you do it, you know what? That's honest and genuine because you don't usually hear it.
Yes.
And maybe that's a part of what we need to do moving forward. I think the only difference, really, David, I think what you and I are kind of getting at is I just think, the freshest face possible I want to put on that message. And maybe
I'm
that's
listen.
not the best
I'm with
idea.
I'm. I want to go back to that for a second.
Yeah.
Whether it's a celebrity or a new face,
Yeah.
I I, I agree.
Yeah.
There needs to be a new set of faces at
Yes.
the very top. The communicators
Yes.
need to be a new generation. I mean, by the way, I think it's actually pretty funny that there's a very good chance. How old are you?
I'm 60.
Okay, you're 60. So is that technically are you a
I'm
boomer?
right on the baby boomer next generation edge. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm a Gen Xer,
Yeah.
and there's a very good chance that we're going to be Gen X is going to be the first generation to be skipped
Yes.
for
I've
the
heard that too.
presidency.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we're going to be skipped. Like they're
Yeah.
going to go from the boomers to the the millennials, right? Like
Yeah.
we're just going to be skipped. And you know what? I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Like I'm totally fine with that.
Yeah.
And by the way, one last thing. I did hear somebody say that I think it was it was the historian John Meacham. He was on The Daily Show. And he said something like, the more Donald Trump behaves this way, the more he makes possible like the presidency of AOC. Now, AOC
Yeah.
is like a proxy for like that movement.
Right.
And I want to leave people with this because I think that's a really important point, that
Mhm.
there is this idea that like it's always darkest before the dawn. I think one thing we've learned is that, like, look, in some ways, progress takes a very long time. As you said, we still don't have Medicare for all. It's absurd. It's an embarrassment. It's an abomination compared to other advanced industrialized economies. It's just ridiculous, and that's
Mhm.
taken a long time, and that's a reflection of how powerful the vested interests are. But
Yes.
we also know that things can change really fast. We are
Yeah.
living in an era of like
Yeah.
things can flip really, really quickly, and I do think that ultimately there is going to be a sort of snapback, a backlash to what's going on. I mean, maybe I'm an optimist, like there's an optimist trapped in here, but I do think that is true. And we
Yeah.
have to hold on to that, because I do think, like, when you see a poll like this week, that what is it, like 65% of people say they're unhappy with the healthcare system, 60% of people say they want Medicare for all, like that is not going away.
Right.
That feeling is going to get more intense. And I'm not saying like, the next 5 years, like we're automatically going to have Medicare for all, but I do think it's going to be right back on the table because of what Donald Trump is doing. And I'm not somebody who wants to say like it's got to get worse before it gets better, but I do think a silver lining in things
Yeah.
getting worse is that it reminds people that the status quo is not okay.
That is a very positive way to end this. You're right. And I do think the ACA stuff, because people are going to feel those, you're going to have a lot of stories coming out next year with people losing healthcare. I do
Yes.
think you're right. That's going to help push us more than ever
Yes, to
towards
say,
that system.
I mean, honestly, there was this moment in actually it was in 2020, where Kamala Harris, such a tragedy actually, she was in a CNN town hall, and she was asked, this is early on when she was running for president, and she said, she was for Medicare for all at that point, and she said, well, what about all the paperwork, all the administration, the insurance companies? And she said, we're just going to get rid of all that.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah.
that's it. Like,
Ding,
I was
ding.
like, you that's it. Like,
Yeah.
and then she like sort of backed off it. Like,
Yeah.
I was like, where'd you go? Like,
Yeah.
that's the message. Nobody likes that crap. Like,
Yeah.
we're just going to get rid of that, is like a really simple message that I
Mhm.
do not believe died with the end of the Bernie Sanders 2020 campaign. I think
I agree.
I think we can be back there fighting for that real soon.
Yeah. David, thank you so much for your time, and really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.